Mackenzie Johnston with Tri-State Livestock News, bringing you discussions concerning fair cattle markets. Today we have the opportunity to talk with Todd Wilkinson of DeSmet, South Dakota. Todd, to start off with, can you tell me a little bit about your background and your involvement within the cattle industry?
I am currently the policy chairman for NCBA. I was president of the South Dakota Cattlemen's Association several years ago now, and I'm a part owner in a feed yard facility near DeSmet. It actually has an Iroquois address by the name of Redstone Feeders with my two brothers. And then I have a cow-calf operation with my son, and then we also do stocker work. I've been in the cattle feeding business for probably over 30 years now.
What do you feel are the major issues standing in the way of fair cattle markets?
Well, that's a pretty broad topic. What is a fair cattle market? I would say one of the biggest issues right now, me being a feeder, is the lack of shackle space for the processing fat cattle. Clearly, the COVID-19 issue has presented a problem we've never seen before. To me, it's demonstrated that we simply don't have the packing capacity, and when you have any sort of interruption in the packing process, it puts the feeders and the ranchers at a distinct disadvantage.
With that being said, what solutions do you think need to be implemented by the cattle industry in order to fix this problem?
Well, I think one of the biggest fixes out there, certainly it isn't an easy fix, but it's probably a long-term fix, is if we could get back to where we had more kill capacity. From my perspective, I deal a lot with regionals rather than necessarily the big four packing plants. Have a lot of success dealing with regional packing yards. And if we had more independents that had space out there, I think that competition would add a lot. And just simply having more capacity. We've closed so many packing plants over the last 10 years. We really don't have nearly the negotiating ability that we did some years ago.
You mentioned negotiating ability within our cattle markets. There has been a significant amount of talk within our cattle industry over the past 2 months concerning negotiated cash trade. Senator Chuck Grassley has brought forward the 5014 bill that would require a minimum percentage of negotiated cash trade in our fat cattle markets. What are your thoughts on this bill and increasing negotiated cash trade?
Well, unfortunately, that's the same bill that Senator Grassley has dusted off a couple of times. That's not a new origin bill. And my concern where that comes in is it's going to change the ability for the producer to market grid cattle, and it's going to impact the formula traders, which we don't have a lot of up here in your area, my area, but we certainly have a lot of in Texas and Kansas. And the classic example would be if the packer came calling and you said you had 1,000 head on your show list, and he says, I'm full this week, so I can't take your formula cattle. I think we're going to put the producer at a real disadvantage, and the packer already has enough of an advantage over us. I think there's an unintended consequence with that 5014 on the producer. If it would help the cattle producer and it causes problems to the packer, that really isn't my concern. My concern is the producer, the feedlot operator, the retained ownership guys. If they get limited in their options, I think that would be a real unintended consequence of that.
Do you yourself, or do you know any feeders that have cattle that need to be slaughtered, but they can't currently get them moved?
Well, if you'd asked me that question last Thursday, I would have said yes. I have personally. I sold a couple loads last week, and I've had them on my show list for 3 weeks, and I couldn't even get a bid. I have guys that I work with out of North Dakota, Minnesota, certainly South Dakota, that are very concerned they can't get bids out of any of the packers. In fact, a close neighbor of our operation decided to go to an auction barn with his fat cattle, which is not typical from where I'm sitting, to market his cattle because he literally couldn't get a bid out of a packer. That's a scary thing for a feeder because this market has been dropping so bad the last 3 weeks. I literally took, on the price that I got last week, I took $18 a hundredweight less than what the market would have been 4 weeks ago. I dealt with a feeder, just met with him last week, and he's in a major pickle because he can't get rid of his cattle. His lender is raising concerns. I'm not sure he's going to be in the feeder business if he can't get these cattle out. I mean, that's how serious it is out there. I don't know if a lot of folks on the cow-calf side realize how desperate some of these feeders are right now. It is really, really ugly.
No one knows for certain, but we are facing a significant backlog of cattle. What's your outlook on that backlog? Do you think we can work through those cattle by the end of this year?
Yeah, I do. And the cattle on feed reports would reflect that. It would reflect that we should be able to work through that inventory. Being one of those people in that equation, we can work through it, but the profitability of working through it is not very good. And when you're taking those losses on a per head basis, yeah, you can work through it. Whether you're still going to be standing on the end of it is another part of the equation.
What are your thoughts on the DOJ investigation into our beef packers?
Anytime it's the Department of Justice, it gets my attention. I'm hopeful that given the subpoenas that are out there, that there is going to be an actual review. I don't know if there's collusion. I don't know if there's price fixing. I can look at numbers, and I can add up numbers, and I can see that somebody's making a whole lot of money, and it's not the cow-calf guy, and it's certainly not the feeder. Are their numbers legit? Is it a question of just supply and demand? That's possible. I'm grateful, let's put it that way, as a cattle feeder, that somebody is looking at this thing with an eye towards, is everybody approaching this correctly, or is somebody taking advantage of a situation to the disadvantage of the cattle industry? I don't know the answer. I'm hopeful that we'll learn some answers. It's a long time since Holcomb already. We've been sitting here waiting.
There's been a lot of talk since President Trump made the statement about eliminating trade deals where we import cattle into America. What are your thoughts on imports into America of beef and cattle?
Well, given that we're talking about, 10-11% of the total production, I think limiting imports would have a disastrous effect in terms of, it would give us a short-term bump on our cull cow prices. So I think you'd see culls go up and cull bulls go up, but long-term, it's going to drive the price of hamburger up to the point I'm afraid we're going to start losing the consumer, and they're going to get turned away if they have to continue to pay for that expensive hamburger. That's one of my biggest worries about this whole thing, this whole COVID deal, is we've got a very forgiving customer, and they understand that meat prices go up when supply goes down. I sure don't want to chase those customers away by what I think are rather ridiculous prices for hamburger. Now they've since come down. I don't want to lose our consumer, because if we lose our consumer, we really are going to suffer.
And that was going to be my next question. If you think there's a chance we could price ourselves out of a product, considering the high prices in the grocery stores, do you think fake meat products such as Beyond Meat, do you think they are a threat to our beef demand?
I wouldn't label them a threat. I mean, I think they're more of a niche. The statistics that are out there and the amount of the quantity that's being moved, it appears to me like people like beef, and they like a taste of beef, and consuming public is still going to want to eat that if they can afford it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, is there a risk? Yeah, certainly there's a risk. That kind of gets back to your question about the investigation of packers. We've got to make sure that everybody is being treated fairly in this thing. Again, I understand the COVID-19. I understand that packing plants went down. I understand they can't control that. That's an environment where a lot of people are working in close proximity. But it would seem to me that the packer, if they're making that much more of a margin, should be offering that price back to the feeder, who in turn can then go out and bid more for the calves. Because, that's the situation I'm in right now. I'm looking at contracting for calves for fall delivery. Right now, I can't hedge anything. It just doesn't work.
We've seen both the pork and the poultry industries become vertically integrated. Do you think the cattle industry is in danger of going down that same path?
I don't think we have the same makeup in the cattle industry that you see with the poultry and the hogs. So while I'm not concerned with it becoming any more vertically integrated, because it is already vertically integrated to a large part on some big feed yards. I mean, some big feed yards have contracts with packers. But, we've seen a shift away from that a little bit, because you got like Five Rivers is no longer owned by JBS. They may have contracts there. I'm not privy to any of that. I don't think the beef industry can become as vertically integrated as hogs and chickens, simply because of the wonderful nature of our ranchers. I don't think that the packers are ever going to be able to reach back far enough and get control of the calves coming off of the ranches in the United States, which is a testament to our operators. Can they put more of a stranglehold on the feedlots? Probably not the little guys like I would fall into, but if you're operating with any size, they can certainly put a stranglehold on you if you want to get into a formula deal with one of the majors right now.
If we don't see significant change within our cattle markets, within our cattle industry, and these tough cattle markets persist, what do you see happening to the American cattle producer?
I'm concerned that right now, if we don't see more shackle space, because I think that's the glaring issue right now, is there's just simply not enough packing capacity. If we don't see that packing capacity grow so that there's more competition in the market, I'm concerned that there are going to be a number of producers, be it the rancher or be it the small feeder operations, that are simply not going to be able to exist in this economy.
How do we increase that packing capacity? Obviously, the packers are making pretty decent profits and things are chugging along pretty good for them. And then on the state level, the regulations are pretty tough for these smaller plants to get going. Not saying that they can't, they definitely can, but it's a significant amount of additional shackle space that we need to increase competition within our market. So how do we do that?
Well, I think some of it's going to come back to similar to what we are seeing in maybe in Missouri right now would be a good example. You're seeing a packing facility that was basically shut out of the business because of some zoning issues, and the state of Missouri is now kind of getting behind it. Ultimately, up here, up north, to me, it's going to take some state participation, and goodness knows we look at Aberdeen, and that went through some pretty tough times. But I think that's an example. If we can get more capacity that way, that size, we don't need another 5,000 or 6,000 head. Well, we do, but we're not going to get them. Let's put it that way. What we need are more 1,000 or 1,500 head a day processing facilities, even the 200 and 300, but there gets to be an economy of scale. I don't think the regulation is nearly as difficult as the capitalization. The cost of money in terms of what they have to have by the time that animal comes in and gets delivered at the plant until they see that money cycle back in through the retail purchase, that can be 3 weeks or better for them to get that float back in. It's very difficult to compete with a Tyson or a National or a JBS because the mid-size packing plant simply has to go up against their capital. And that's a tough bill. When you have to float that, be able to pay for those cattle, you can understand why there's a difficult barrier to get more packing facilities. But I think it's going to take some state and regional fixes. I think we're going to have to decide, do producers want to put more packing facilities on a regional basis in the area? The track record isn't very good with them the first time. It seems like the first time the packing plant comes up, it likely fails, and it's the second or third time before you get it in there and you see success. Aberdeen's going great right now. We need a whole lot more Aberdeens in the world.
If you could sum it up into one sentence, what does the cattle industry need most right now?
It really needs more packing capacity. We've lost so much. It's made a real bottleneck in the industry, and I think the only way that changes, if our cow numbers are going to stabilize, and that certainly looks from cattle facts like our numbers are going to hang in there should be a return on investment for somebody to get into the packing plant business. And there's a whole lot of producers out there that would love to have their ranch be able to track through on a grass to finished product label, like some of the specialty meats that are out there. The public will pay for that better choice of meat, and they want to know the story behind the rancher. But really, I don't know that we have any ability to get a Tyson or a JBS to put much stock in that. We need to work with a more regional packer to be able to market that specialty product so that the public can go out and choose the beef that they want.
You mentioned labeling our beef product here in America. What are your thoughts on MCool?
My problem with MCool is we tried it. It didn't seem like it was driving any success. I am of the opinion, though, there needs to be better traceability, because for the public, that seems to be what they want to see, is they want to know where it comes from, not so much the country. They want to trace it right down to the back 40. I mean, they want to know if it's coming from Sam Smith's ranch, and they want to know that Sam Smith's ranch is using good animal husbandry, and that's going to take traceability. Our industry is amazing. We spend all this time arguing about MCool, but then we can't seem to get traceability done. And to me, that's our ticket. If I can put an ear tag in there, and in electronic ear tag in my calves, and if I can get a return on that investment, and they're shipped into Japan or wherever at a higher price, I'm willing to do that for that traceability, as long as I'm going to be able to be compensated for that additional cost. And I think that's our ticket to the future until we get the trade negotiations changed. Right now, I don't think anybody's willing to absorb another WTO decision, because that one's literally sitting there waiting to jump down our throats again. I think we got a better story to tell even than U.S. beef. I think we got a better story to tell by saying that this is Sam Smith from South Dakota, or this is Pete from Wyoming or Montana, and they're coming off of this range, and I think the public will eat it up.
That's all I have for questions. Do you have any closing statements you'd like to make about the industry or the cattle markets?
I would just say that nobody could have ever anticipated COVID-19. To me, it's demonstrated a huge, huge fundamental flaw in our industry right now, and that is we have reduced our packing capacity to a point that any strain on the system causes an effect upstream, I guess I should say in this case. And we've got to do something, unless it means more shackle space. Just simply breaking up a Tyson doesn't make any more shackle space. We need more beef processing facilities. I hope the industry can get behind it as a group and eliminate the arguments and get us all on one page so we can move forward.
One more question before I let you go. You just stated that you hope the industry can get behind this solution and stand together. Do you feel that our industry is capable of doing such thing, getting on the same page? So often we fight more amongst ourselves than actually fighting the issues that are trying to tear down our industry. So do you think we can get on the same page?
I do. Fundamentally, if you take away a half a dozen different issues, you all get back to some great things. You get back to super people that care about the product that they want to market, and they want to keep their operations generationally. If we get back to that point, I think you get into 100% agreement, and sometimes we need to just check our egos at the door and all agree to go in and work for a goal. And, I can tell you that I deal with NCBA. I know the guys in RCAF, and I certainly know the U.S. Cattlemen. They're good people in all those organizations. We all just need to work together.